there, welcome to the UkeStuff channel and welcome to this full UkeGuide review of this instrument, which is the Flight NUS 200NA. It's their Laminate Teak Soprano, and to be honest, I don't think it's available freely in the US. You might have to order it from, for example, Europe or the UK if you want one of these. This is Flight's really entry-level instrument they offer. These are made in Indonesia, and so Flight has instruments that are made in Japan. They have instruments that are made in China and Indonesia. So there are two different models that are made in Indonesia, or two sopranos and two concerts that are made in Indonesia. Now, a couple of disclaimers before we go any further in this video. First and foremost is I do some part-time work with Flight. So as I review this, keep that in mind. And second, although I did buy this instrument, I was allowed to buy it at a discount quite a while ago. Bought a few instruments at one time, and they were shipped over from their distributor in the UK to me, ordered through their distributor there. So as a result, this is marked as a sponsored ad. Even though I'm not being paid to make this video, and I did buy this instrument, I was allowed to buy it at a discount. And again, I do some part-time work with Flight. So do keep that in mind as I review this instrument. What we're going to do in this video is we are going to talk about some subjective categories that I do with all instruments. Then I'll go over the specifications, then I'll give it a summary and a UkeGuide rating that I do with all my instruments. If you like this video and you like this channel, there are three things you can do to support this channel. First of all, you can like the video. Second, you can subscribe to the channel. And third, you can always buy me a cup of coffee to say thank you for making this content at buymeacoffee.com/UkeStuff. There's one thing I want to mention. If you notice this device on there, some time ago, Ken sent me a pickup. This is it's really not under saddle pickup, but under your strings pickup that you can then send audio out on a pickup. It's a passive pickup that I installed on this instrument some time ago. It doesn't change anything other than the weight a little bit, so I decided not to take it off and not mess with the tuning. And again, I've had this one for a while, so as I talk about it, it has settled down, and what you're hearing and seeing is an instrument that's had a chance to sort of acclimate to its environment for a couple of years. So I've had this one for a while. All right, let's go over the subjective categories. First of all, cost. Its list price, as you see it, is $56, which means that it's probably available for less. However, that's sort of a false number because you would have shipping charges from wherever you order this from. So do keep that in mind. The value. The price exceeds the value. It's an entry-level instrument, and you also get a gig bag. Now, again, full disclosure, I don't quite know what I did with this one's gig bag, but I have its big brother's gig bag. It's a little different Flight gig bag. It's sort of a green or grayish blue gig bag. It's still a decent gig bag for a entry-level laminate instrument. It still has a hanging tag, which is important to me, and it comes with a couple of backstrap and sort of extra padding. And the test to me with the gig bag is, could you haul this bag around all day at an ukulele function or a conference or a festival and not get tired with the bag? And the answer is yes. I would like to see padding at the bottom. It's not super padded. It's very lightly padded, but quite honestly, with a laminate, you don't need that much either. So it does include the bag at that price point as well. Some companies sell bags for that much, with that much padding. So in the bag alone, you recuperate much of the cost of the instrument. The Flight is screened on the logo, and it is a Velcro pocket on it. So the value, it exceeds the value. There are a couple things that you're going to want to do to it. So, and we'll talk about that as you go, a couple things you want to check. Incidentally, part of the reason why I'm recording this video on this day is earlier today I was going through TikTok and I saw Alex Beds, who is the general manager at Southern Ukulele Store in the UK, talk about 5 entry-level instruments, and this was one of them that he chose, that he carries, and he said that he has sold over 500 of these to schools in the UK, and I can see why. Having played other entry-level instruments, you're getting a solid entry-level instrument at the lowest price that a store can sell to you. Now, can you buy a cheaper instrument? For example, Cala sells direct to education, things like that. Maybe. Or can you buy a cheaper instrument off of Amazon? Perhaps. But when it comes down to getting an instrument from a legitimate dealer, this is probably as low as you're going to go for cost and value. So just do keep that in mind. Now, build quality, for the most part, it's pretty good. As you'd expect with a not very expensive instrument, there's not going to be any binding or anything. There are some just, like, it's not totally smooth in every possible spot. There's some, nicks from the assembly process from what was put together. But it's attractive, and that's a whole nother question, right, is the appearance. But its build quality generally is pretty good, with a couple of scruffy parts here and there. Like you can see some scruffiness on the bottom of the fretboard there. It's stuff that is going to be pretty common for a lower price instrument. Again, it's nothing that would keep me from buying it or playing it. Or you can see in some case, I think the concert that I have is a little rougher even so. You might have sharp fret ends that you have to deal with. And we'll talk about playability, but the action is higher than I would like. So I'm going to actually, after this video, I'm going to remove the K&A pickup there, and I'm going to adjust the action here. And I think action adjustment at the nut will be most of what it needs, and we'll talk about that when we get to playability. But in general, the build is pretty clean, and we'll take a look inside in just a second. It looks pretty well built, but let's take a look at the inside. One of the things I do is I use an endoscope, and I call this the interior Uke Cam. It's just the endoscope, and I just record what we're seeing. So let's go in. You can see that the cross brace is perhaps a little scruffy there. You'll never see it any other time. You have traditional bracing. Scrolling a little further back, you can see quite a bit of glue on the bridge. That's the bridge support plate. And you can see the sort of positioning screws that are popping through. Quite a bit of extra glue on that cross brace up there. And that's look at the tail block. Let's look at the head block. Okay, looking at the upper bout, you can see you've got the notch kerfing. The glue mess isn't bad on the sides of the instrument. It's just really, well, we saw the extra glue mess on the top there on the bridge plate. But other than that, the notch kerfing looks pretty clean. Not an excess of glue there at all. And you can see the neck block there in its traditional sort of configuration for an ukulele. And that's our quick look at the inside of the Flight NUS 200NA. Alright, now in terms of appearance, it's very plain. It has no frills on it. A standard sort of Martin-esque headstock with a etched Flight logo. It looks good enough. The teak looks attractive. It's an attractive looking wood. The Marante neck, Marante, matches well with the rest of the body. And the Nandu fretboard, which is not something we're used to, and bridge look pretty attractive. So the appearance is good. Now, the availability in other places, it's very available. As I mentioned, Alex Beds at Southern Ukulele Store mentioned that he sold over 500 of these to local schools in the UK. So that's pretty readily available. Here in the United States, not so much. I don't think it's yet available here. So there would be extra costs in the United States if you wanted to buy some of these for example, your school. In terms of playability, it's a wider neck than usual, although when we get to the specifications, that's a little deceiving. We'll talk about it, but it is almost a 38 millimeter neck, so nut neck, so it's wider. It's also a very deep C shape as well. It's not as C shape as the last instrument I reviewed, which is the Enya EUC or 1, the X1 model that I looked at the concert, but it is pretty chunky, and this again, like most ukuleles that are imported, could have a slightly different profile. I think that's the next major change in ukuleles that I'd like to see in the next batches that come out from manufacturers. So it is a very thick C-shaped neck. It has no side position markers, which are going to hurt this instrument in its score. They may come with the markers today, but at the time when this was bought, just from Flight's UK distributor, there were no side position markers on at that point, so that will impact the score. And the action is higher than I'd like it to be, so I'm going to be looking forward to taking that down. Doesn't take much, isn't a really hard process, but people get nervous about that, operating on their instrument. And for a school system, you'd want to check each one if you were going to be doing that, because you want your kids to play on a good experience as well. So in terms of playability, it's not bad, but it will be improved after the setup. So I would definitely recommend a setup. Sound quality, it's a laminated instrument. It's a soprano. And I want to check the tuning again, because again, with a little bit of high action, you're pulling the strings a lot out of tune. And I am getting a little bit of a buzz on one string, but I don't want to knock the instrument itself for that, or sort of a weird sound, because number one, these strings are a little old. I don't know if you can hear that, like a little bit of a buzz there, and it's not coming from anywhere in the hardware or anything. I would want to remove the K&A, and I would want to change the strings before I really make a call on that. And generally I like fluorocarbon strings anyway, so that's probably where this one is going to go. I've got a lot of Martin M600s that I have on hand. So the sound here is a warmer sound. It's loud and punchy like you want a soprano to be. But I'm not a big fan of nylon strings anyway. So as I'm playing it, I'm definitely pulling the strings down farther than they need to be pulled because of the high setup, and that will all be adjusted. I may do a follow-up review to this one, so you might want to look to see if I've done a little talk about how it's playing after a setup and some new strings. So as a whole, the sound is fine. It's punchy. It's a little bit on the darker laminate side, but it's certainly acceptable for, again, an entry-level instrument that you can buy from a traditional dealer, and it would come in less than, as you'd expect, some of the other name brands that are out there. Another thing I like to do in these videos is let you see what I'm hearing using the app Tonal Energy Tuner on my iPad, so you can see what's happening with the harmonic energy. So I play the C chord. Let's see what happens. That's a very standard laminate tone. You do have the full spectrum as you strum, but then it all goes to low end and sort of sounds a little boxy. It's not a bad sound, but it's definitely a laminate tone, and that's what you'd expect with an entry-level laminate ukulele like this one. Now we've talked about the general categories about the instrument, let's get into the specifications. It is a soprano ukulele with a measured scale length of 13.5 inches from nut to saddle. It has 15 frets with 12 to the body. It has no side marker position dots. Its body style is a traditional double bout. Laminate teak top, laminate teak back and sides. It has a Nandu fretboard and a Nandu bridge. The fretboard is not radius, and the bridge is a standard tie bar bridge with, again, the extra K&A pickup at the moment when I'm recording this. The nut and saddle are made out of PPS, which is a plastic, but it certainly looks a lot like bone. It looks a lot like new bone, more than it does just plastic. So if you're wondering, like, how does it looks a lot more like new bone as a material than just standard ABS or whatever, PPS. It is not a compensated saddle. Saddle is just straight across. And the finish is an open pore satin, not a gloss. And you can obviously see the pores in the instrument as it hits the light. So it sort of has that dog hair sort of effect with the teak there. The overall length is 20.9375 inches, so almost 21 inches. And it weighs 15.5 ounces, although I do, again, want to make a point that it'd be even lighter without the K&A pickup right there. And it's pretty well balanced even with the pickup. It has standard open geared tuners that work just fine. The action at the first fret is high at 0.87 millimeters, so I will want to bring that down. The action at the 12th fret is also high at 3.0 2.18 millimeters. So again, I like that to be around 2.65, so I'm going to have to bring down likely the saddle, but for sure the nut. And again, as you adjust one, it changes the geometry on the other side too. So I would start by adjusting the nut and then adjust the saddle. That's what I'll do when I do that. The nut width is 37.80 millimeters, which is almost 38 millimeters. And the space between strings at the first fret, G to A, is 27.85, so not quite 28, with 8.59 millimeters between each string. So really, the nut could be spaced a little wider to take advantage of that nearly 38 millimeter nut. The depth of the neck at the third fret is 21.41 millimeters at the third fret. That's just where I measure it. So that's a pretty thick neck. That could be taken down too for the instrument. And again, you do get the gig bag that comes with it. All right, now that we've looked at the specifications, let's summarize the instrument. Once again, I do some part-time work for Flight, and I was allowed to buy this instrument at a discount. I did buy it, so again, that's why this video is marked as a sponsored video. This instrument is one of Flight's value price models. You can't get into a Flight really much less than the price of this instrument. It's made in Indonesia, and the 200 models, you have a teak, and you also have a acacia laminate that you could buy as well. So you can buy the 200 or the 250, and that's also true in the concert size. Now, as far as I know, these have not yet been imported into the US, so if you want one, you have to get one from elsewhere, other markets. It's a bare bone, basic entry-level ukulele with no frills. It needs side position markers, which is going to impact its score, but it does include a light gig bag that's pretty decent. It's sort of a gray-green or bluish-green versus Flight's traditional tan or red models, or even the newer blue or black models that they've offered with some instruments. There is a slight amount of scruffiness to the build, but it's basically what you'd expect from an entry-level instrument that's at a bargain value price. So it is a rare instrument with a 38 millimeter nut, although more could be done with the nut. If you wanted to get really crazy, you could go and have a custom nut made for you that really did take advantage of those couple extra millimeters on the nut than you traditionally get. So you could do that. You could definitely order like a new bone nut and install that yourself and really take advantage of that spacing here. You could do that. So the score here would be higher with side position markers. I would definitely recommend this. And as I saw Alex Beds at Southern Ukulele Store selling this to school, he would recommend it clearly too, as a potential starter instrument or an instrument for kids or an instrument for schools. The trick in the United States is just getting one. So what score does it get? Well, if you know this channel, if an instrument doesn't have side position markers, a couple of years ago I started this, the highest rating it can get is a 3 out of 5. So that rating would be higher with two things. One, with a better setup coming from the factory, and then the other with side position markers that would make the score of this instrument go much higher than it is. But as it is, it's a 3 out of 5 on this channel. Doesn't mean I don't like it, doesn't mean I don't recommend it. It just means that's a rule that I put in place, that if an instrument doesn't have side position markers, and it may today they may come with side position markers, but at the time when I bought this, they certainly did not. All right, thanks so much for joining me for this video. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll be back soon with some more Uke stuff for you.